In the quiet corners of Windsor, an envelope changed everything. Unearthed by sheer accident or fate, it bore Diana's unmistakable handwriting. What lay inside wasn't just a letter. It was a detonator. And the moment it was read, Queen Camilla's place within the family turned to quicksand. The palace braced for impact. But no one, not even Charles, expected the aftershock to strike this hard. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. It all began with a creak of a hinge that hadn't moved in decades. Deep within the lesser-used west wing of Windsor Castle, a minor renovation project led staff to an old dust-covered trunk. A royal archivist, assuming it was filled with retired tableware or old ceremonial garments, opened it without ceremony. But buried beneath yellowed linen was something far more significant, an envelope sealed in wax, with the words "For my sons only" scrawled in Diana's distinctive hand. There was no fanfare, no audience, just quiet disbelief as the envelope was handed to Prince William. He held it for a moment, frozen, knowing this wasn't just nostalgia, it was a message from the past that had refused to die. Alone, William opened the envelope. The handwriting inside was hauntingly familiar. The ink may have faded, but the emotion in every word still burned. Diana had written it during a time of intense upheaval, just weeks before her tragic death. The entries were raw, unfiltered, and disturbingly prophetic. She detailed not just her suspicions but her deep-rooted fears of manipulation, of betrayal, and of being erased. Most chillingly, she named names. There, in ink, was Camilla's, written not with venom, but with sorrow. Diana's voice leapt from the pages, cautioning her sons against trusting those who had once orchestrated her loneliness. Prince William sat in silence, the weight of his mother's warnings settling over him like a storm cloud. He did not tell Camilla. He didn't tell his father either, not yet. Instead, he confided in the one person whose loyalty he knew was absolute: Catherine. The Duchess of Cambridge was shaken, but not surprised. The two of them locked the diary in a private drawer, knowing full well that its contents could destroy the delicate peace the royal family had tried so hard to maintain. What they didn't expect was how quickly rumors would begin to swirl. Windsor is a fortress of secrets, but no wall is impenetrable. Whispers began to ripple among the staff. Someone had seen the envelope. Someone else had seen William's expression afterward. Before long, quiet questions turned into hushed speculation. Had Diana left something behind? And if so, what did it say? The tension grew thick enough to suffocate, yet still, the palace maintained its polished silence. Meanwhile, Camilla remained unaware. She was focused on preparations for the upcoming Balmoral family, gathering an event meant to symbolize unity, tradition, and order. But unknowingly, she was walking into a storm that had been building for decades. The queen consort believed the past had been buried, that her place was now secure. But Diana had never truly left. Her presence lingered not just in memory, but now, in ink. William's silence spoke volumes, and Catherine's carefully measured poise was now laced with resolve. The diary had awakened something neither of them could ignore: a sense of unfinished justice, a legacy that demanded to be honored. As Camilla finalized her travel plans and outfits for the retreat, she had no idea that her name was being spoken in corridors with increasing caution and concern. But the winds at Balmoral had already shifted, and one woman's name was whispered with caution: Camilla. Diana may be gone, but her presence has never truly left. With each diary page, her voice grew louder, her truth clearer. And what she revealed was not only shocking, it was damning. The very foundation of the monarchy trembled as her ghost began to rewrite the present from beyond the grave. In the days that followed William's private reading of his mother's words, a heavy silence fell over his household. The kind of silence that speaks louder than any declaration. Diana's entries weren't merely reflective, they were prophetic, urgent. She wrote of manipulation lurking within the very walls meant to protect, of calculated kindness masking exclusion, and of individuals unnamed in public but unmissable in private, who had systematically erased her from the narrative long before her death. And at the center of those carefully inked warnings stood one name more than any other: Camilla. The woman who had once been the subject of whispered gossip now appeared in Diana's reflections as a strategic force, orchestrating emotional sabotage behind palace walls while carefully constructing her public redemption. William, once considered the steady heartbeat of the monarchy, now walked as if burdened by invisible armor. Catherine, ever attuned to shifts in her husband's mood, noticed it immediately. He was colder, more observant, withdrawn. Conversations grew shorter. His smiles no longer reached his eyes. The staff, trained to remain silent, began to exchange worried glances. The prince had changed. He wasn't angry, he was awakened. Something inside him had turned. And only Catherine knew why. What he had shared with her late that night, under the soft light of a room meant for rest, did anything but soothe. Diana's pain, resurrected through her diary, became theirs. Catherine had always revered her mother-in-law's legacy. But now, that reverence transformed into responsibility. Every word Diana had written felt like a torch passed to them, a call for justice that could no longer be silenced. But there was also fear because they both knew that the monarchy had spent years suppressing these truths. To speak them now would be to unravel decades of image building. Yet silence had its cost. And Diana had already paid it once. And while all this unfolded, a glaring absence made everything more complicated. Prince Harry, Diana's other son, the one perhaps most emotionally entangled in her legacy, remained unreachable. Calls went unanswered, messages acknowledged but ignored. William needed him, but the silence stretched on. Whatever wounds divided them were not yet ready to close. But Diana's words were never meant for one son alone. They had always been for both. Catherine, meanwhile, became the eye of a storm no one else saw coming. Outwardly graceful, inwardly ablaze, she began preparing in silence. There was no confrontation, no visible rebellion, just a steady awareness building inside her. She smiled for cameras, nodded through pleasantries, and stood at her husband's side as if nothing had changed. But everything had. Her quiet fury wasn't the kind that lashes out. It was the kind that waits. It was the kind that plans. Because if Diana's voice had returned, Catherine would ensure it was heard. But while William processed the emotional quake, another force stirred one that wouldn't remain quiet much longer. She smiled for the cameras, but behind palace doors, Catherine was waging a quiet war. The diary didn't just reopen wounds, it gave her clarity. In those pages, she found not only Diana's fears, but her own truth. And Catherine would ensure those truths were not buried again. No longer was she simply the dutiful duchess, poised in pearls and diplomacy. The moment William placed that diary in her hands, Catherine shifted. Every word Diana had written felt like both a warning and a call to action. And Catherine answered it with precision. She didn't lash out. She didn't confront. Instead, she moved in silence. With William's full trust and quiet approval, Catherine began aligning every element of their inner circle to serve one purpose: to protect the future and to ensure the past was never repeated. Camilla was no longer just the queen consort. She had become the embodiment of a threat that Diana had seen long before anyone else dared to speak it aloud. The operation had a name one only whispered among Catherine's closest aides: Iron Rose. It symbolized exactly what she had become: elegant, untouchable on the surface, but forged with the strength of steel beneath. She chose her confidantes with surgical care. These weren't just advisors, they were loyalists. Each one was briefed, not in rage, but in reason. Camilla's growing influence had to be checked. Not through chaos, but through control. Every press briefing, every scheduled appearance, every whisper planted in the right circles was part of a larger strategy to tighten the margins around Camilla, to recenter Diana's sons as the heartbeat of the monarchy, and quietly relegate the queen consort into the background where Catherine believed she had always belonged. What made this all the more dangerous was how unaware Camilla remained. She noticed shifts, yes, fewer interactions, more distance at family events, but she dismissed them as seasonal tensions, perhaps even William's moodiness. She never suspected that Catherine had built a fortress of influence around her husband, and that every decision now flowed through a filter, designed to insulate, isolate, and eventually eliminate the need for Camilla's voice. What Diana feared most, Charles's weakness, his inability to draw clear lines, was still haunting the throne. The king, caught in emotional paralysis, failed to see the maneuvering happening beneath his feet. Or perhaps he saw it but chose to look away. After all, Catherine made no noise. She didn't rebel. She simply outmaneuvered. Meanwhile, her media team worked quietly but relentlessly. Every image released to the press subtly elevated Catherine's role, solidified her as the symbol of continuity and grace. Headlines began to shift tone, portraying her not just as the Princess of Wales, but as the unshakable future queen. Camilla still held the crown, but Catherine was claiming the story. And in the palace, stories were power. The public, unaware of the quiet war being waged behind the smiles and choreographed photo ops, continued to believe in unity. But the cracks were there beneath the surface, behind the walls, and within every silent glance exchanged during royal engagements. But fades are fragile, and one unexpected move would tear it all apart. Every year, the Balmoral gathering is a royal tradition, private, sacred, immovable. But this year, a shocking omission ignited a media frenzy. Queen Camilla was nowhere in sight, and when reporters asked why, the palace offered only silence. Behind the scenes, a confrontation had erupted that would change royal dynamics forever. The Balmoral retreat had long served as the monarchy's most intimate symbol of continuity. It was where crises were buried under tradition, where photographs projected unity, and where decisions were quietly made that never saw the light of day. But when the invitations went out this time, one name was conspicuously missing: Queen Camilla. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't an oversight. It was deliberate. The omission, revealed only when paparazzi failed to capture her arrival, sent shockwaves through both the media and palace staff. Whispers turned into headlines. Was the queen consort excluded from her own royal gathering? Palace aides refused to comment, but the damage was done. What was once speculation turned into scandal when a senior insider confirmed to a prominent tabloid that Camilla had been politely uninvited. Not through outright rejection, but through the very language the monarchy had perfected: silence. A silence that said more than words ever could. Behind closed doors, the tension reached a boiling point. Charles, blindsided and torn, was forced into an impossible position: defend his wife, or stand by his heir. And this time, neutrality was not an option. What followed was a confrontation years in the making. William, controlled yet seething, demanded clarity. The conversation, described by a source as unprecedented in intensity, laid bare the deep fractures within the family. William didn't hold back. He invoked Diana's diary not as a relic, but as evidence. She warned us. "You just didn't listen," he told his father. The room fell silent. Charles, visibly shaken, had no immediate response. There were no royal protocols for this kind of reckoning. The king, so often protected by deference, now stood stripped of control, facing the consequences of choices made and ignored. Camilla, upon learning of the exclusion, reportedly broke down in frustration and disbelief. For decades, she had climbed a mountain of public disdain, only to find herself cast back into the cold. She demanded answers from Charles, but he had none that could shield her. Because deep down he knew this wasn't just about one gathering, it was about legitimacy. And legitimacy in the royal family isn't inherited. It's earned. And sometimes, it's revoked. Yet, the most telling part of this saga wasn't the confrontation itself, it was what followed. The palace, masters of narrative control, chose not to correct the record. No formal statement. No scheduled appearance to refute the rumors. Just a calculated silence, signaling that the balance of power had shifted. Behind that silence stood William and Catherine, who now controlled more than just public opinion, they controlled access. And Camilla had just been denied it. But it wasn't just a personal feud anymore, it was about power, legacy, and the soul of the monarchy. He waited his whole life to be king, but now Charles found himself a prisoner of two women, one gone, one betrayed. As the pressure mounted, so did the cracks. Was this still his monarchy, or was Diana ruling it from the grave? The crown weighed heavier than ever. For decades, Charles had lived in the shadow of both duty and controversy, walking the tightrope between love and responsibility. But now, that rope was fraying. With the resurfacing of Diana's words, immortalized in a diary that refused to be silenced, the ghosts he had long tried to bury had risen to challenge his reign. At the center of the storm stood two opposing forces: Camilla, his loyal partner through scandal and scrutiny, and Diana, the eternal symbol of the monarchy's guilt, and the public's affection. Charles was no longer navigating palace politics. He was facing a reckoning. Alone in the quiet of Clarence's house, sources say the king returned to the letter again and again. He read her words not just as a grieving husband, but as a monarch under siege. Diana had written not only from a place of heartbreak but from insight. She had predicted the consequences of a monarchy built on compromise and image. And now, every warning she'd left behind seemed to be unfolding with haunting accuracy. Charles, torn between his personal loyalty to Camilla and his duty to preserve the monarchy's stability, began to retreat into himself. Decisions that once came swiftly now stalled. Camilla noticed the shift. She wasn't just being excluded, she was being abandoned. The change became visible. At events, Charles stood slightly apart. Speeches that once mentioned Camilla with warmth now left her name untouched. Public gestures of affection grew scarce. While no official statement was released, those closest to the palace understood what was happening. The king was creating space, whether out of fear, strategy, or guilt, no one could say. What was clear, however, was the divide that had begun to fracture the monarchy's inner court. Advisors were split down the middle, some advocating for damage control, others urging complete silence. But the silence itself was becoming deafening. In a bid to reclaim control, Camilla planned a solo engagement, one that would reassert her visibility and remind the public of her place beside the king. It was not just a royal appearance, it was a statement. But the palace intervened. Charles, reportedly after a tense conversation with senior aides and his son, abruptly canceled the outing. The message was unmistakable. The queen consort was being benched. Her fury, though contained behind palace walls, was volcanic. She had endured decades of public hostility and emerged crowned. But now, she was being exiled, this time not by the press, but by the man she had fought to stand beside. The backlash was immediate. Royal watchers noted the shift. Columnists questioned the silence. And Camilla, once untouchable within her carefully restored image, now appeared vulnerable. Charles had not condemned her, but he had failed to defend her. And in a monarchy where symbolism is everything, that silence was louder than 1,000 headlines. His indecision was no longer a personal matter, it was a public crisis. One that threatened to erode not just his marriage, but the very control he had waited a lifetime to inherit. As the king faltered, the woman once called the other one prepared to fight back. Camilla had survived decades of scandal, exile, and vilification. She wasn't about to vanish quietly. With the monarchy turning cold, she plotted a quiet counterattack, one that would use the very tools Diana once did. Charm, media, and carefully orchestrated whispers. She knew the palace could shut her out of Balmoral. They could cancel appearances, pause photo ops, and offer no public defense. But they couldn't silence her entirely. Camilla turned to the arsenal she had long kept hidden: her personal network. A carefully cultivated circle of crisis publicists, seasoned journalists, and long loyal media allies. They had served her well during her transition from public enemy to queen consort. Now she summoned them again, not to protect her reign but to rescue it. There would be no outright retaliation. This would be a campaign of suggestion, subtle influence, and slow manipulation. If the crown refused to protect her, she would protect herself. On her own terms. In the days that followed, the media began shifting. Not dramatically, but noticeably. Articles emerged highlighting Camilla's long-standing charitable work, her advocacy for literacy, and her so-called grace under fire. Op-eds questioned whether the queen consort was being treated unfairly. Some floated the idea that internal power struggles, not Diana's words, were fueling the hostility. The narrative was being bent, not broken. Camilla wasn't just trying to repair her image. She was trying to recast herself as the casualty of a modern palace Cold War. Then came the insinuations. Carefully placed sources suggested that the authenticity of Diana's diaries should be scrutinized, that they may have been altered, misinterpreted, or even selectively released. There was no proof, no accusation, just doubt. And in a war of perception, doubt was a weapon. Camilla's team didn't need to convince the world. They only needed to divide it. And slowly, the public began to polarize. Team Diana. Team Camilla. Comment sections turned into battlegrounds. Breakfast panels speculated endlessly. The royal family said nothing, but Camilla's counterattack was gaining momentum. Behind the scenes, she pushed harder. A private request was made to meet with Charles's senior advisors. The queen consort wasn't pleading, she was warning. She reminded them of her loyalty during the darkest years, the sacrifices she had made to stand beside the king. And then, more ominously, she hinted at the existence of letters. Private correspondence from Charles during their long affair written in his own hand. Letters that, if made public, could do irreversible damage. It wasn't blackmail. It was leverage. And she made sure they understood that. The palace now found itself trapped. Alienating Camilla risked exposure. Defending her risked public fury. Charles remained silent, as always. But silence no longer equaled safety. Camilla was no longer fighting for status. She was fighting for survival. And she was prepared to do what Diana had done, reshape the narrative from the outside. But what she hadn't counted on was the emotional power Diana's legacy still held. Because while Camilla played the media like a strategist, a new force was rising. One built not on scandal or spin, but on something far more dangerous to her cause: loyalty to the woman who could no longer speak. But no media war could prepare her for what came next. An unexpected alliance forged in Diana's name. In the shadows of a monarchy on the brink, the future came together. William and Harry, estranged, divided, yet forever bound, spoke once more. And the topic? Their mother. What she knew, what she feared, what she wanted. The pact they made that night would turn the page on the monarchy itself. For years, silence had stood between them like a wall of grief, pride, and unspoken wounds. But now, with the contents of Diana's diary setting the royal household ablaze, William knew he couldn't carry it alone. Whatever had happened between them, one truth remained: only Harry could fully understand what Diana meant by her warnings. So William did what many thought he never would. He reached out. It wasn't an apology, and it wasn't a peace offering. It was a message that simply read, "We need to talk. It's about her." Hours later, a secure call was arranged. No staff, no intermediaries. Just two sons and the voice of a mother who, in death, had become more powerful than either of them could have imagined. The call was quiet at first, awkward, heavy with years of distance. But when William read excerpts from the diary aloud, everything shifted. Diana's words cracked through the frost like sunlight in winter. She had written not only of fears and betrayals, but of hope. Hope that her sons would one day stand together, not for the crown, but for each other. Line by line, memory by memory, the past was unearthed. And as it lay before them, raw and unedited, the brothers began to see the present with terrifying clarity. Camilla. Charles. The silencing of truth. The weaponizing of legacy. It was all there, foreshadowed by the very woman who had been pushed to the edges of royal life, only to become its emotional core. By the end of the call, they didn't have a plan, but they had a pact. A simple, unshakable agreement: protect their mother's legacy at all costs. That meant ensuring her voice could never again be buried under royal silence. That meant refusing to allow the palace to erase her pain. And that meant sending a message to their father, clear, calm, and final. No more betrayals. Not in her name. Not again. Harry didn't promise to return. That was never part of the deal. The wounds between him and the institution were still too deep, too fresh. But he gave William something even more valuable: his full support. Publicly silent, privately unyielding. Whatever came next, William would not face it alone. Diana's sons were no longer fighting on opposite sides. They were standing back to back, against a palace machine that had underestimated what grief, truth, and loyalty could ignite. And while the brothers found unity in the shadows, the light of public exposure was about to scorch everything. It was the leak heard around the world. In a single headline, Diana's words became gospel. Her diary, once sealed in a royal drawer, now belonged to the people. And with its publication, the question wasn't just who betrayed whom, but whether the crown itself could survive what she revealed. The morning it hit the front pages, nothing in the royal machine could contain the fallout. "For my sons only," the leaked headline screamed. beneath a scanned image of Diana's familiar handwriting. Within hours, the internet was ablaze. Excerpts spread like wildfire, and with every word, the foundation of royal silence cracked further. The most damning entry was short, brutal, and unmistakable. Camilla is the architect of my isolation. It wasn't poetic. It was surgical. And it landed like a hammer across Buckingham's carefully curated image. This wasn't commentary from an outsider, it was the confession of a woman trapped inside the gilded cage, finally shouting through the bars. Social media erupted. Hashtag Justice for Diana became more than a hashtag, it became a movement. Millions shared photos, quotes, and tributes. Old interviews resurfaced. Unseen footage circulated. News anchors choked on their neutrality as commentators tore through the royal household's response, or rather, their failure to have one. The palace, stunned into paralysis, issued a dry statement questioning the diary's authenticity. But the damage was already done. The public didn't want clarification. They wanted accountability. And the more the palace tried to downplay it, the more furious the response became. Camilla disappeared. Her scheduled appearances were quietly cancelled. Public outings were postponed due to scheduling conflicts, but the silence around her absence confirmed everything the diary had said. She wasn't in retreat, she was in hiding. Her once resurgent image collapsed in a matter of days. Decades of rehabilitation undone by a single leak. And though no one could confirm who had released the pages, the public had already decided this was Diana's reckoning, long delayed but now unstoppable. Even Charles, known for his tight grip on crisis control, said nothing. And it was that silence, hollow, hesitant, haunted, that truly spoke volumes. Meanwhile, Catherine made no comment. She didn't need to. A new official photo was quietly posted to the palace site. The Princess of Wales standing tall, poised, wearing Diana's iconic sapphire ring in full view. No caption, no context, but everyone understood the message. It wasn't subtle. It was symbolic. The future had chosen a side, and it wasn't with the Queen Consort. Even the most loyal royalist struggled to defend what had been revealed. The diary didn't just tell Diana's story, it forced the world to see who had been erased to maintain an illusion. The words were raw, unedited, undeniable. And now, they belonged to history. But even as public outrage reached its peak, the true finale came not with scandal, but with silence. The Balmoral gates opened, but one seat remained empty. The royal family gathered under the shadow of history, of love lost, and truths finally spoken. Diana's presence loomed larger than ever, and Camilla vanished, not by scandal, but by a force more powerful, legacy. Officially, it was a personal retreat, a carefully chosen phrase that suggested rest, distance, perhaps even reflection. But within the palace walls, everyone knew it was exile in disguise. Camilla did not return to Balmoral. Not after the diary. Not after the headlines. Not after William's confrontation, or the sudden public absence that followed. Her name wasn't mentioned. Her absence wasn't explained. The silence around her was the final confirmation that the balance had shifted, and she was no longer at the center of it. In her place stood Catherine, poised, unwavering, and for the first time, entirely unchallenged. When the royal family posed for the annual portrait, one of those rare, curated glimpses into their unity, it was Catherine who stood beside William, not just as a wife, but as a symbol. Her posture, her presence, her quiet command over the moment told the public all they needed to know. The monarchy had found its face for the future, and it was no longer Camilla's. Charles stood behind them, not as the commanding sovereign, but as a man visibly aged by the storm. The diary had drained him, the confrontation had weakened him, and Camilla's disappearance had isolated him. He smiled, but it didn't touch his eyes. The king who had once waited a lifetime to rule now looked like a figure out of step, with the present still standing, but no longer steering. Inside the estate, a new painting had been hung. Not grand, not ostentatious, but unmistakably Diana. It was a quiet tribute, placed in a hallway frequented by family. No press release, no unveiling ceremony. Just a new presence among them. One that didn't need words to say what history had refused to admit for decades. She was never truly gone. And now, she would never again be forgotten. Behind the scenes, senior advisors had already begun realigning loyalties. Conversations shifted. New roles were proposed. Old positions reevaluated. The future of the monarchy was being shaped in whispers not by decree, but by momentum. What had started with one letter, one diary, had reshaped an institution that had once believed itself unshakable. Because in the end, it wasn't the diary that shattered the illusion, it was the truth no one dared face until now. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.